Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, here's a pretty quick video here for you since I'm supposed to be making dinner for everybody. We're going to go over really quick some of the greatest offenses in the history of baseball. So if you haven't been following the blog, you really should at least take a look at it. I talk about this thing that I call the Domination Index. There was a book written by Rob Nyer and I can't remember what his first name was, Epstein. Eddie Epstein, I think it was, back in about 2000, 1999 or so, called Dynasties. They came up with what they called the SD score to talk about how much dominance a single baseball team had over the rest of the league. It's a pretty simple concept. You look at how many standard deviations away from league average the runs scored and the runs given up by each team were, and then you combine the two and you get this score. It's a nice score because you don't have to worry about ballpark effects. The reason why is because that all comes out in the wash. You have to pitch in the same ballpark that you hit in, right? So if you have a ballpark in which you have a huge advantage because of your offense, your defense probably will be at an equally huge disadvantage, right? And if you have a ballpark in which your pitching has a huge advantage, your offense will be at an equal disadvantage. Anyway, the cool thing about this is that we can look at the components of this, the offensive, i.e. standard deviations away from the mean of runs scored, and the defensive component, standard deviation away from the mean of runs allowed. We can look at these separately and sort of come to at least some sort of conclusion or some sort of speculation as to who the greatest and not greatest offenses and defenses of all time were. Now, the problem that we have that everybody will tell you right away is that you have a problem because of park factors, which, I mean, if you're only looking at one end of the equation, it doesn't really balance out that well. Having said that, you'll be kind of surprised to see what comes up. So I did a blog post about this just a couple days ago. Figure we go over some of the findings really quickly. So we'll open up the screen here, take a quick look just at this. This is from the National League, and these are the numbers. So you can see here I have both the runs scored and runs allowed standard deviations, or what I call the Domination Index. I like the idea of Domination Index better than SD score because SD score doesn't really tell you much. What we're really measuring is domination in the sense of like how much of an outlier was this team. And so when we look here at the list of, this is the top, like 20 or so in National League history, we can see, first of all, the effect of the park factors, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of these, I guess 20 teams or so are Colorado Rockies teams, which tells you something's going on. Now, this is the reason why I keep this side over as well, because you can see that the Rockies in those years were not really that dominant because the pitching also gave up a lot of runs. And the truth is, it's not that the team was really that good. It's that the ballpark created this, extreme effect back, especially in the early 2000s, that we had never seen before, and also late 90s. We'd never seen it before in baseball history. Therefore, relative to the league, the Rockies were like some sort of super team, right? You'll notice that, say, the 2007 Rockies, right, the team that went to the World Series, is nowhere to be found here. Interesting to talk about, right? So yeah, I wouldn't say that the 96 or 97 Rockies were necessarily like maybe the best offense of all time, but the Cincinnati Reds of 76 and 75 are definitely on this list. Interesting to note that most people, I think, would consider the 76 Reds to be the better of the teams, right? Because they swept the Yankees. I don't remember if they swept the NLCS or not. I have to go back and look that one up. But they swept the Yankees in the World Series, in a series in which they didn't use any substitute players at all, which is a pretty remarkable achievement, right? But as far as this is concerned, it turns out that the 75 Reds look better because, interestingly enough, they seem to have had better pitching/defense. That's a team that's famous for not having such good defense. Other notable teams, I don't know if many people remember the 2003 Cardinals that fondly, but they come up with a domination score index that is quite high. It's hard to remember because of the way that the postseason is these days, which teams actually won the most games in which season. So, thank you very much to the modern leaders of baseball, especially the Bud Selig, for taking what was once a great system and kind of ruining it. Up next, though, of course, is the 53 Dodgers, which is the team that we all know and love so well, who wind up with a very, very good runs scored amount. Not so great for runs allowed, but runs scored, they were definitely a dominant team. And then the 93 Phillies, another team that we all know and love, that, interestingly enough, despite Kurt Schilling, maybe didn't have the best defensive approach ever. Other notable teams on here, of course, the 1902 Pirates. We will talk a lot more about them in the future because the 1902 Pirates might not really count. They weren't exactly playing against a fairly designed competitive environment. The 86 Mets, which is another interesting thing. You usually think about pitching when you think about the 86 Mets, but this was a team that had a lot of offensive brilliance. That one is really impressive because all of the teams above them, as I look through them, were in pitchers' parks, with the possible exception of the Pittsburgh Pirates, but that 1902 Pirates are an exception on many fronts. Coming up next, of course, is the 49 Dodgers, who were just no-hit around these parts, and you didn't see that one. Apologies for not filming that. And look at who this is. The 1984 Cubs had a offense that ranked better compared to the league than even the 2008 Cubs. I think any Cubs fan will tell you that the 2008 Cubs are the better team. All right, but the 84 Cubs, who we would think of mostly because of Rick Sutcliffe and having an offense that feels like it was sort of like patched together, actually had a really good offense compared to the rest of the National League. Anyway, 77 Phillies we also know about. It's another very good team. 68 Reds, I don't know. The jury is still out on that one. Look at the American League really quick. I talked before about the 2015 Blue Jays, 2016 Red Sox, also teams with great offenses. 2015 Blue Jays came out of nowhere and really surprised me. Really one of the best teams in the history of the American League with that Domination Index score. Surprising. 2007 Yankees, and here are the 2006 Yankees. I did a article a little while ago. There was on Baseball Think Factory, what was once known as Baseball Primer. Back in 2005, there was a discussion about whether the Yankees were one of the greatest teams of all time that led into a general discussion about the greatest teams of all time, how to find them, and eventually to a league simulating some of these teams against each other using Diamond Mine Baseball. Haven't gotten to this point yet in my blog, but we're going to get to the point where we start talking about the simulation results and some of the problems that came up with that. But the truth is that the 2006 Yankees did have one of the most dominating offenses in the history of the American League. They were right on with their prediction, which is really interesting. Some of these teams you know about, 1914 Philadelphia Athletics, who were swept by the Miracle Braves in the World Series, and it really was a miracle considering how good the Athletics were with their $100,000 infield. 2017 Astros, you know about. 13 Athletics, you should also know about, another good team. 82 Brewers, exactly where we would expect them to be, Harvey's Wallbangers. Now, this is interesting. So I got runs scored and runs allowed statistics for the 1900 American League from a website that I'm not sure how it computed it. I'm not sure if it's fully accurate or not. But if so, the 1900 Indianapolis Hoosiers, who finished either third or fourth, are on that list as one of the most dominant offenses in American League history. Very, very interesting. Minnesota Twins of 65, you know about that team. 35 and the 68 Tigers. The key to Tigerdom was having a really good offense and pitching that was clearly above average. 2013 Red Sox, you should know about. 2005 Red Sox, you should know about. Interesting, the 2004 team's not on here, but they're probably like right under this. And then, 1907 Tigers were a pennant-winning team. The 93 Tigers. Now, there's a team that you probably wouldn't think about. I bet you couldn't name me, other than Lou Whitaker, Alan Trammell. I bet that I don't think I could name to you anybody who was on that team. That was a team that was under 500. The 84 Tigers and 34 Tigers, no surprise to anyone. And then the 31 Yankees. The 39 Yankees are actually further down here, interestingly enough. But yeah, the 31 Yankees, who famously scored 1,067 runs, and then they're followed by the 99 Indians. Most people talk about the 95 Indians as having a great team. They forget about the 1999 Cleveland Indians that had such a great offense, but had a few pitching problems. Anyway, and there's a little bit more here as well, and I did a little video, as I said before, about the 2015 Blue Jays, and a little bit more about whether the 2006 Yankees were an all-time great team or not. I just thought that may be a little bit interesting to you to sort of go over some of this stuff and think about it. It's the sort of thing that people don't talk about much these days, and I really think people should talk more about it, right? Because, I mean, it's an important part of the game, right? Or team baseball, I should say, is a very, very important part of the game. It tends to be overlooked. We focus so much on the sabermetrics in terms of how individual players perform. What we don't focus on a lot is how teams perform against other teams, and especially on the best and most meaningful way to measure one team's success against another team's success, and conversely, one team's failure against another team's failure. We'll have more about this as time goes on and as we sort of dig into things a little bit more. But there's a lot of really, really interesting things to look at here, stuff that, as I said, most people don't look at. To my knowledge, there's not really been an update of the Dynasties book since it came out. I think it was published in 2000. And I really do think it's high time for people to really start talking about this again and to start like digging up some of these ideas and facts. I will tell you that I don't think the Domination Index is necessarily the best way to measure team dominance. but I do think it's better than one loss percentage. And there's a reason why I think just looking at the total raw number of wins is not quite the best thing to do. Now, the postseason is different. We can have a really long conversation about that, and maybe we will talk about that a little bit later. And for that, I will talk with you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.